Welcome to the Online Strength Coach Podcast, episode 69, Block Periodization. How's it going? And welcome to episode 69 of the Online Strength Coach Podcast. Hopefully that wasn't too loud and in charge for you. It's pretty goddamn loud in this little box room that I call my office. So yeah, today is the 28th of January 2016. I've just been uploading the Online Strength Coach Podcast back catalogue onto SoundCloud, which means I am currently in the process of putting together the Online Strength Coach podcast, which will actually be on iTunes by the end of Sunday, as I said I would do in the last episode. I've been listening back to a few of the old episodes. They're actually pretty decent. I don't know. I guess probably surprised myself a little bit with the quality of them, which is quite pleasant. But I have been mentioning it since June, July of last year that this podcast was actually going to go live, and I did say when I got to 50 that I was going to put them on. So I just took another 18, 19 episodes and another 3 months for that to happen. So yeah, today's question comes from the comment section of the last episode 68. Comes from David. Very interesting, Mark. Thanks for answering my question in such a detailed manner. Now here's another. Excellent, thank you very much. Do you think block periodization is the most efficient strength training method for most athletes? I had quite an in-depth topic, but why not? We're here, let's answer it. So just to frame this a little bit, block periodization was popularized primarily by Verschansky. It's also something that gets pushed fairly regularly by Mike Stone, and what it pertains to is breaking up your training into blocks or into periods of defined amount of time. Normally they come in blocks of 4 weeks, or what is also called a summated microcycle or summated mesocycle. So a microcycle is a week, a mesocycle is a few weeks, and then your macrocycle is like 3 months, 6 months, and then you go on to like an annual plan, biannual plan, Olympic cycle, or a 4-year plan. So the main thing between block periodization is you spend a period of week working on, not primarily, although some people can term it so or think it's so, primarily one physical factor, and then you move on to the next one. So within strength training, you do what we call a hypertrophy block, or work capacity block, or just basically a block of high volume training, where the main goal of the block is to induce muscular hypertrophy, induce strength endurance, and increase work capacity, perform a high volume of training using lifts or variations of lifts that you want to get better at. So for powerlifting it would be, of course, squat, bench and deadlift variations, and for weightlifting it would be snatch, clean and jerk variations, and you would probably do a lot more assistance work in that kind of block than you would do in a competitive or strength focused cycle. So the idea would be that block would happen first. So you'd have a 4 week to 8 weeks, so you might have one block or two blocks focusing on that one kind of basic physical quality, and then you move into, so say you have 2 blocks of strength and endurance stroke hypertrophy work. The next block would be strength work at a moderate volume, and then you go into another strength block and another strength block, and then you might move on to a maximal strength block where you move from doing sets of 5 or sets of 3 to 6 reps into sets of like 1 to 4 reps with higher percentages. And the idea would be that you would the work capacity work, the hypertrophy work, the strength endurance work would then allow you to handle larger volumes of more specific strength work. So the 5s, the 3s, the 6s, the 4s at 75 to 90% max. And then you might spend 3 to 4 months training like that, cycling volume up and down, intensity up and down, building for 3 weeks, deload for 1 week, new block, blah blah blah. So you'd have like a 3 to 4 month period of training like that, what can be called a transition period. So you could call the first block can be called your accumulation phase. So your two blocks of strength endurance, hypertrophy work can be termed as your accumulation. The next block, or the next series of blocks, or the next 4 blocks could be called acclimatization or transition. And then your peaking block or your maximum strength block, let's say you have 2 blocks of that where you're working at 90 to 105% of all max, 1 to 3 reps, 5 to 10 sets, say, training, and your variation would decrease as the blocks went on. So you might have more variance in the first 2 blocks. The kind of preparatory blocks might have more variation. They might have more assistance. They'll definitely have more volume. They could have like probably a moderate frequency, and then you'd move into your transition block, like 4, what we determine the 4 blocks of strength training. Your assistance work would decrease, your variation would decrease, your frequency might increase slightly. This is probably where you might use the highest frequency in your training. And then towards the end, the realization block or the maximal strength block, then the exercise variation will diminish probably to just competition variance and minimal assistance. Intensity will also be very high. Volume will be probably moderate to low. And this kind of training can only be sustained for so long if you're looking for progress. And if you want progress and you need to kind of stay towards the back end of that sort of cycle, you don't want to realize, unless you're going into competition or you're peaking, in which case you will want to realize you're training from beforehand. You want to keep flip-flopping between strength endurance, work capacity, hypertrophy work, or high volume training work, and like got a moderate level strength level work or strength building work, or moderate volumes, moderate intensities, cyclical in nature, yada yada. So that in a snapshot is what block periodization is, or the ideas behind it, popularized primarily by Verschansky and in the West by Mike Stone. Oh, that was a big mouthful. Okay, so that block periodization, so I guess mentioned quite a lot. There's a few kind of popular, or perhaps not popular, but certainly more well-known periodization schemes, such as daily undulating, which is kind of the sexy new one on the block at the minute. You got the conjunct method, or the conjugulate method, which of course popularized by Louis Simmons and Westside. You'll have linear, which is basically just a set timeline, which is basically just one block, and often gets misconstrued as being like a periodization strategy within itself. But linear periodization is basically just basic training or programming principles that get put into like a 12-week block, and then they're like, oh, that's linear periodization. All periodization is linear periodization to some degree. Because if there's no timelines and there's no planned, if there's no, basically if your program doesn't have some aspect of high work periods or high capacity periods or higher volume periods and with lower intensities, moving into periods of moderate or lower intensities, moving into periods of moderate or lower volumes, moving into higher intensities, then you're probably not following a very well planned training block. And it could periodization basically means change with time, so it doesn't necessarily mean that those training blocks have to, they have to modulate intensity and volumes in a cyclical manner, but they should do. If you want to be successful with your training, that's what you should be looking to do with your periodization, or your programming as is also known. These are other kinds of or there's non-linear periodization, which I'm not entirely sure the people that talk about it know what it is. You know, there's different names for different kinds of periodization. But what people kind of do when they talk about periodization, and they talk about daily undulating, and they talk about this or they talk about that, they're talking about training in like little boxes where it makes sense to do the same sets and rep scheme, the same intensities, the same everything for the same exercises for this entire week. So we do 3 sets of 10 on this block, and by doing that, you know, I do 3 sets of 10 on back squat, but I also do it on walk and lunge, or I do it on curls, or I do it on shrugs, or I do it on hamstring curls, or whatever I'm doing within that block, because it's a hypertrophy phase, or it's a muscular strength or muscular endurance phase, or it's a high work capacity phase, or this is what we're working on physically within this period of training. That means I need to train every exercise the same way, which is complete and utter nonsense, really. Because what you look at, what you look at when you look at training, you look at the goal of the exercise, you look at the time frames involved, and you consider these things. So everything, a good program is more like a conjunctive approach. It's not like the old West Side kind of paradigm is closer to what you actually should do when you put together like training programs. We're talking primarily here for lifters, but this carries through for athletes really as well. You should look at your exercises. So for instance, if I'm looking at power clean and I'm an athlete, to develop jumping ability, to develop rate of force production, to produce higher power outputs, I'm using it because I can take a reasonably heavy load and move it at a reasonably fast pace. I can shift it at 2 meters a second. I can shift 200 kilos at 200 meters, or 2 meters a second. Fuck, if you can shift it at 200 meters a second, you'd be some athlete. You know, I can produce high wattages with these movements, which will help me transition my maximum strength into more speed strength related activities, like throwing things, jumping, sprinting with weights, or sprinting with sleds probably, or sprinting in the parlors, and more athletic training that's going to actually have a carryover into my sport. Then there's not really many periods, or if any periods in time, when I'm going to be doing sets of 10 with that exercise. Because I'm not trying to, well, one, it's not cardio, CrossFit, I'm looking at you. And two, it's not a bodybuilding exercise, so accruing a high level of volume by doing high repetition sets never really makes sense with that exercise. So if it doesn't make sense with one exercise in the program, this is where I'm kind of getting at. You go with back squat. The goal of the back squat is to produce a maximum force reduction. It is, or for powerlifting, that is the exercise. That is the goal of the program, is to get better at that exercise. So there's no real point in doing 10s on that exercise, because unless you're a bodybuilder, in which case there's no real point in doing 2s and 3s, because for a bodybuilder, the goal of the back squat is to get bigger thighs, bigger glutes, dem gluteus glutes. You know, it's to get bigger legs, to get bigger arse, to help them grow. So why the fuck would they need to do 2s and 3s and 1s? Increase stress in the joints, increase the likelihood of injury for lesser volume, and volume is the goal for bodybuilding. So for a bodybuilder who periodizes their training or follows a periodization routine, there is little worth in heavy training, because it doesn't achieve the goal what you're aiming for. And the same for a powerlifter, unless you're building, you're going through like a strength endurance phase, in which case rather than doing 10s, you can do like six sets of 6, or 5 sets of 5, or 7 sets of 5. Or if you look at good strength training routines such as Smolov, such as Russian squat routine, you can see how volume can be built in a strength endurance phase without the need for saying, right, everything needs to be done, right, stop it, right, we're doing hypertrophy with 3 sets of 10 for everything. It's a non-nuanced way of looking at programming, and it's very inorganic, it's very inflexible, and it's not a very good way of producing results within strength training. So you need to look at Well, really need to look at, so when you look at producing a periodized plan, you need to just look at the competition year or the competition calendar. So it's 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. Look at what you need to be focusing on at that time period. So for a powerlifter, if you have 4 to 5 to 6 months of training before you start competing, there's no real need to realize strength to do 1 RMs, 2 RMs, 3 RMs at the start of your training program, because it's just nonsense. Just spend time, ditch the belt, ditch the sleeves, ditch the wraps, ditch all of your supportive equipment and get stronger out of it. It'll help you build up, it helps you build up strength at a level your body can adjust to as you get stronger. So you're much less likely to get sore knees and a sore back and sore shoulder if you don't wear things that don't let you lift more weight. You just lift what you can lift. Over a period of 3-4 months, get stronger at that. And then when we get into 2 to 3 months out, then maybe we look at introducing various different bits of equipment. So if you're a raw lifter or a raw in inverted commas lifter, you might look at lifting, bring the knee sleeves in for a month, bring the belt in for a month, and then start looking at competition calendars and what you need, where you need to be at that time. Then you need to get more of a handle on where your strength is, and you can start, once you get, as a powerlifter or as a weightlifter, more so as a powerlifter, when you get into finite time spans, and a finite time span is like 8 weeks out from a meet, then you can do a linearized program. Basically, I want to hit this meet, this squat, this bench, this deadlift, and I'm going to work backwards from there. I need to be doing this for 5s here, this for 5s here, this for 3s here, blah, blah, blah. The sort of thing that you'd hear Bill Kazmaier talking about a lot if he does an interview, or Ed Cohen. His training approach was very much based on that, although that comes from a different background. Or the Little Bridges follow a very similar approach, where they know in a finite time span, within 10 weeks, 12 weeks, these are the lifts I need to hit on this roadmap to hitting this in comp, and hitting this at this meet. So back to the question, is block periodization the most efficient? No. Periodization is a nuanced topic. It is something that you learn as you go. It is something that can't be put into nice neat little boxes and names because it's too simplistic. It's not an easy task, or not an easy thing to portray in a it doesn't have well-defined edges. It's not black, it's not white. It's grey, it's nuanced, it's nitty, it is everything on the broad sense, but it is everything on the narrow detail. It comes down to things like this dumbbell press at this day. So I've set out my 12-month plan. I've got a month plan now. I'm looking in on my month plan. My overarching goal of this month is this. My overarching goal of this month is to build up some work capacity to take forward into my squat, bench, and deadlift training later down the track. Okay, so this person is training 3 days a week. Okay, within this frequency works better for this person. These exercise variations work better for this person. So let's put it together in a way that makes sense and flows and lets the person not be stiff and sore, other than training stresses like they should be getting. So DOMS is fine. We don't mind them being a bit tired. That's fine. That's part of training. So we're going to do these exercises on day one. We take a day off here. We look at the week plan, and within that week plan we put the exercises where they need to go within that plan. And then when we have that kind of structure put together, we put together the block structure. So we have our week plan. Now let's look at, we've got 5 weeks here, so let's go boom boom. Let's lay out the 5 weeks. Now we've got the 5 weeks laid out. Let's look at a cycle now that's going to fit my remit. So I've got my remit at the top. My remit is to build work capacity, or to build strength, endurance, or hypertrophy for this lifter, so they can go on for the next 4 to 5 months and start to kind of feed off this block. So it's going to need to be a lot of volume. So are we going to take an approach where we're going to start at a percentage? Let's start at 75%, and we'll start with 30 reps in the week, and over the next 5 weeks we're going to build up to 90 reps in the week, so that we've got a huge volume load that we've developed and built, although our intensity is going to remain flat. And then that's, then we've done that. Okay, we've looked at this, and how does that affect the next block? What are we doing with the next block? Well, we've got a huge volume load here. we're going to start turning this volume load, or we want to start on this 75% intensity volume load, or this 75% intensity volume. We've got 90 reps in the week of 75%, so it's quite a large amount of volume. So we're going to need to freshen up a little bit, but we need to start increasing our intensities, like slowly and building it up. And start looking at the way we lift these like 80% weights. It becomes like a monthly process. Really, you can lay out a year's plan, but the things are going to happen within that year. People are going to get back spasms during one of your blocks, which means you're going to have to adapt your training. People might have a baby, people might move house. This shit is going to happen, so you can't really have where block periodization would fall down, and where a lot of like kind of the over prescriptive periodization falls down is trying to put it into action in the real world. So we can have an overarching plan. We can have a 4 month, a 4 year, a 2 year, a 1 year plan. But when it comes to putting together the fine detail, putting in putting in the edges, putting in the black and white, putting it together, then we can't really go much past, at best, probably 3 months. Probably more likely to be put together in a week-to-week sort of basis. As in, here's your 4 months of training, here's your 4 weeks of training, here's your 5 weeks of training. Here's our goal. Our next block, the goal is this, so that we need to produce this work in this period. That's how we're going to do it. And we look at our exercises. When we look at our core exercises, when we look at our assistance exercises, why are they there? And then how are we doing them? I would never really program upper back assistance ever for anything other than hypertrophy, because the muscles, well, for a powerlifter anyway, these muscles don't need to be strong per se, but they need to be well developed and they need to be balanced strength wise. But they don't need to be. You can bench press 300 kilos and bend over a row like 150. It's not balanced, but you've got, like they say, you can't shoot a cannon in a canoe, so you gotta build the canoe a bit if you want to produce like a big strong upper body pressing machine. So it is a topic I could probably go on for another 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes on quite easily, happily, but something I would need to plan out and talk about. So this is the sort of thing you need to do a few courses or a few years at university to first have a good understanding of, and then another 8 to 10 years as a coach before you start to kind of understand it. And then when you've done 40 years, you might sort of understand it. And then when you might sort of understand it, then your name would be Boris Shilko. And that'll be... So hopefully it's been interesting. At least I don't think I probably will have answered your question per se. The real answer is there is no superior periodization method. There's only a good plan, well executed. A bad plan, well executed, is far better than a good plan, poorly executed, as the old saying goes, because it's fucking true. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. That's went a bit longer than I thought. I'm hoping to have these podcasts all uploaded by the end of today. It's taken me by the guts of about 50 minutes to upload the first 30, so shouldn't be too much longer before they're all uploaded to my SoundCloud account, which is Empire Fit. And then I'm going to go around trying to put them onto YouTube and then the Strength Coach website. So stay tuned. Hopefully I'll have a iTunes URL or an iTunes place, or a place you can go in the iTunes store to have a look at it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Any questions, comments, please leave them below. If you wish to have your question featured on the Online Strength Coach podcast, check out that new chime. The email, of course, is speedpowerperformance@gmail.com. Any question you want answered, I will happily do so. I'm hoping to be back again, hopefully maybe Saturday, Sunday, for another episode. Until then, have a nice Thursday. Enjoy the next couple of days, and I'll see you then. I'm going to leave you some burger smalls, hopefully not too large, and in charge. Who's dead now? No.
Guarantee me yourself, level up. You don't believe around the world, nigga, double up. We don't play around, it's a bet, let down. Niggas didn't know me, now they want, but they know me now. I'm the young Holloman with the Goldie sound. Can't hold me, niggas hold me down. Cooler, school me to the game, now I know my duty. Stay humble.